It was 3 days before New Year's when my mother dropped the kind of comment that sounds casual on the surface, but hits you with the weight of a brick when you realize what it actually means. I remember because I was standing in the kitchen, slicing apples for my daughter's snack, and she said it like she was mentioning the weather. "We're heading to the mountains this weekend," she said, pouring herself a cup of tea. "Just a little family cabin retreat for New Year's. Should be peaceful." Then, without even looking up, she added, "There wasn't enough room for your little ones, so it'll just be your brother's family this year. You understand, right? My name's Elvis. I'm 36, father of two, and I've spent the last decade quietly learning how to bite my tongue. You don't grow up in a family like mine without mastering the art of swallowing disappointment and pretending not to notice the patterns. The birthday dinners I was too busy to be invited to. The sudden radio silence when I got promoted, but thunderous applause when my brother bought a new grill. The Christmas where my kids got dollar store puzzles while my niece unwrapped a Nintendo Switch. You get used to it. Or you pretend you do. Growing up, my brother Dean was the golden child. 4 years older, football star, always brought home the shiny report cards and the big wins. I was the quieter one. Not a troublemaker, not a standout. I just existed. And when I got older, I got out. Worked hard, started my own property management company, raised a family, and made a decent life for myself. Nothing flashy, but solid. Steady. You'd think that would earn some kind of recognition. Instead, it felt like the more stable and reliable I became, the more invisible I got. I didn't even know they were planning a getaway. No mention of it during Christmas dinner, even though they'd clearly been coordinating for weeks. No group chat, no heads up, not even a "hey, we'll miss you this year." Just a passing remark while my daughter nibbled on her apple slices, and I stood there trying not to let my face crack. "Sounds nice," I said, because what else do you say to that? I didn't ask where they were going. Didn't ask who was going. I knew the answers would only make me feel worse. My mom must have taken my silence as understanding, because she smiled and said, "Your brother deserves something peaceful this year. It's been hard for him." Then she went back to scrolling through her phone, like that was the end of the conversation. Peaceful. That word stuck in my head like a splinter. Dean had a rough year, sure. He lost his job in March and bounced around a few temporary gigs. But deserving peace seemed like a strange way to justify excluding my entire family from what was clearly a group celebration. My kids had been looking forward to spending New Year's with their cousins. My wife had taken time off. And me? I'd been working double shifts all December to make sure everything ran smoothly at the rental properties over the holidays. That's when something started nagging at me. A cabin retreat. In the mountains. My company manages over 20 private properties across the state, most of them cozy little escapes tucked away in the woods, booked through third-party rental sites. I never put my name on them directly. That's by design. Cleaner management, fewer headaches, and I don't have to deal with guests knowing the owner. But the timing and the location my mom vaguely hinted at, it got me thinking. Later that night, after the kids were in bed and the house was quiet, I opened my laptop and pulled up the reservation system. I filtered by check-ins for December 30th. Only a few bookings matched, but one name jumped out at me. Booked through an online rental platform, under my mother's name. 3 nights. Full family cabin package. I clicked the listing. It was one of my newest acquisitions. A high-end, 6-bedroom lodge with mountain views, a hot tub, and a wraparound porch overlooking the woods. I'd poured months into renovating it. Every inch had been redone. Oak flooring, custom lighting, state-of-the-art appliances. It was my pride and joy. And my family, my mother, my father, my brother, his wife, and their 2 kids, had booked it, not realizing it was mine. At first, I just stared at the screen. Not out of shock, but out of a kind of hollow amusement. It almost felt poetic. They went behind my back to book a private getaway, and unknowingly handed the money straight to me. They didn't even realize the listing was under my company. The management emails, the confirmation receipts, everything went through my business alias. To them, it was just another cabin in the woods. I sat there for a long time, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to cancel the booking outright. Just block them out and be done with it. Another part of me wanted to call and confront them, demand to know why they felt the need to exclude me yet again. But then a quieter voice spoke up. The voice that had kept me grounded all these years. The one that didn't yell or rage. The one that said, "Let them show you who they are. Then decide how you'll respond." So I didn't cancel the booking. I let it sit, and I started making plans. Because if they wanted peace, then I was going to give it to them. Just not in the way they expected. But before that, before the confrontation, before the sign on the gate, before the look on their faces when they pulled up the gravel driveway, something else happened. Something that made everything a little more personal. Something that turned this from a petty oversight into something that actually hurt. And it happened the next night, when my daughter asked if she could bring her sled to the cabin this year. I looked at her, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor in her little reindeer pajamas, clutching the cheap plastic sled we'd picked up last year at the gas station. She was grinning, full of that bubbly excitement only a 7-year-old can have, imagining snowball fights and hot cocoa and fireworks under the stars. And I had to sit down next to her and gently explain that we weren't going this year. That it would just be her cousins and Uncle Dean and Nana and Papa. That there wasn't enough room this time. She didn't cry. She just blinked, confused. Then quietly asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I felt something in me break. That's when I knew I wasn't just going to let this slide. And what happened next? Well, let's just say the new year came early. But not for them. Let me back up a little. Because before we get to that moment on the porch, me, standing there with a mug of coffee and a quiet smile, while they rolled up in a borrowed SUV, full of luggage and confusion, there were a few more pieces that had to fall into place. A few more signs that this wasn't just a fluke, but a pattern that had finally run its course. And one of those signs came in the form of a group text, one I wasn't supposed to see. The group chat wasn't meant for me. That much was obvious the second I opened it. It was late, about 11:30 p.m., and I'd just finished sorting out a maintenance issue at one of my downtown apartments. I was sitting in the truck outside the unit, letting the engine idle, when my phone buzzed. The name on the notification caught me off guard. Family NY Cabin. I stared at it for a second, frowning. I wasn't in that group. At least, I didn't think I was. But I recognized the numbers, my mom, my dad, Dean, and even my sister-in-law, Clara. Somehow, one of them had added me by accident. I should have just swiped it away. Really, that would have been the polite thing to do. But something in me, maybe that same quiet voice that had told me not to cancel the booking, nudged me to tap it open. Curiosity? Maybe. Or maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't want answers. I tapped the thread, and the first message I saw was from my mom. "Mom, just picked up the mini champagne bottles for the adults. Kids will get sparkling apple juice, of course. I'll bring the board games too. Hope the weather holds." Then Dean responded. "Dean, forecast looks good. Just make sure there's extra pillows." Last time Clara woke up with a crick in her neck and blamed me for the rest of the week. I scrolled a bit, still wondering how this conversation had gone on without me ever noticing. Maybe they'd changed the name of an old thread. Or maybe they just never included me in the first place, and one of them accidentally hit add contact, and my name popped up. Either way, I was in now. And then I saw it. The message that made my stomach drop. "Clara, just double-checking. Are we 100% sure we didn't invite Elvis or his kids? They're sweet, but you know how loud his little one gets. And honestly, I don't want to spend the weekend mediating sibling drama between our boys." "Mom, yes, don't worry. I told him we were going, but said there wasn't enough room. He took it well. No fuss. I think he understood it's been a stressful year for Dean and the rest of us." "Dean, good. I love my brother, but it's nice to finally have a trip that's just peaceful. No side glances. No tension. Just us. Dad, Elvis needs to learn that not every family event has to include everyone. He's too sensitive sometimes. It's not personal, it's just space. Just space." That line. That bland, polite, passive-aggressive dismissal. Like I was a houseplant they couldn't find room for in the car. Not a son. Not a brother. Not a father whose kids would have loved just one weekend of warmth and fun. It stung more than I expected. I didn't even know which part hurt more. The fact that they'd planned the whole thing behind my back, or that they'd convinced themselves they were doing nothing wrong. That it was just space. That it wasn't personal. That it was somehow my fault for being too sensitive. I didn't respond. I just exited the chat and sat there in the dark, my hands still on the steering wheel, watching my breath fog the inside of the windshield. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I drove home. That night, I lay in bed beside my wife, Kayla, and stared at the ceiling. I didn't tell her about the group chat right away. I didn't want to ruin her sleep. But I did tell her something else, that we weren't going to stay home for New Year's after all. I had an idea, and it started with a simple question. "Do you trust me?" She turned over, half asleep, and smiled. Always. The next day, while my family was probably out buying snow boots and marshmallows, I was making arrangements. I contacted the caretaker of the mountain property, Roger, an old friend I trusted more than anyone, and told him to prep the cabin early. Stock the fridge, stack the firewood, make sure the generator was topped off, and that the private use sign I kept in storage was freshly painted and ready to be posted. I didn't tell him what was happening, just asked if he could have everything ready by the morning of the 30th. Then I called the rental agency and manually moved the booking out of the system. My business alias handled all transactions through a shell LLC, so no one would question the cancellation, just a standard property owner override. A refund would be processed automatically. I made sure of it. I didn't want to take their money. That wasn't the point. The point was peace. Real peace. Mine. I still hadn't told Kayla the full plan, but I could see in her eyes that she was starting to suspect something. She just didn't press. She knew better than anyone how long I'd swallowed things down, how many family events I'd quietly endured, how many birthdays and holidays I'd left with that hollow, sinking feeling in my chest. And then came the final straw. It was the 29th, 2 days before New Year's, and Kayla took the kids out for breakfast. I stayed behind to finish up some final client invoices. Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was my mom. "Elvis, honey," she began, and I could already hear the syrup in her voice. "Could you do me a tiny favor?" I didn't say anything, just waited. "We're driving up to the cabin tomorrow," and Dean realized he forgot his ski equipment at our place. He asked if you could swing by and drop it off at the house before noon. I blinked. His ski equipment? Just a few bags in the garage. You know the ones. You'll recognize them. I'd do it, but you know how your father's back gets when he lifts heavy. "So you want me to run errands for Dean?" I said slowly. For the trip I wasn't invited to. There was a long pause. "Oh, Elvis," she finally said, chuckling lightly. "Don't be dramatic. You know we didn't mean anything by it. We just needed some peace this year. You've been so busy with work, and Dean, well, Dean's had such a tough time, poor thing. We just didn't want tension, that's all." "I see. I hope you understand," she added softly. "It's not a slight. It's just about keeping things calm for everyone." My jaw tightened. "Sure," I said, keeping my voice even. "I understand." I hung up. I didn't pick up the ski gear. I didn't reply to the follow-up text from my dad asking for a quick favor to fill up the propane tank before their arrival. I didn't even open the group chat again, even though I saw more notifications trickling in. Dean bragging about how excited the kids were, Clara posting photos of matching fleece pajamas, my mom talking about how this would be the peaceful start to the year we all deserve. And that's when I knew they deserved a peaceful start? No, we did. My kids, my wife, me. I'd spent years shrinking myself to fit into a family that never once thought to stretch themselves to include me. And now? Now they were going to learn what it felt like to knock on the door and not be let in. And they were going to learn it at the one place they thought was theirs. The cabin. My cabin. But the moment that really set it all in motion, the one that pushed everything over the edge, came that evening, when I walked into the kitchen and found Kayla crying silently at the table. She had her phone in her hands, the screen still glowing with a message. I didn't even have to ask. She just handed it to me, eyes glassy. It was from Clara. She had sent Kayla a text by accident, meant for Dean. "Clara, glad Elvis isn't coming. Honestly, I don't think Kayla's ever really fit in with the rest of us. She's nice and all, but just different. Like she's always trying to be polite so people don't notice. Hope she doesn't get her feelings hurt, but this weekend will be better without them." Kayla had typed a reply, but never sent it. Instead, she deleted the thread and walked to our bedroom. I stared at the screen, my fists tightening. I didn't say anything that night. I just stood on the porch, letting the cold winter air settle into my skin. And the next morning, before the sun even rose, I loaded our truck with everything we needed. We were going to the cabin early. I told Roger to post the sign once we arrived. Closed for private use. Owner's guests only. And I made sure the porch lights were on, because I wanted to be standing there when they pulled up. I wanted them to see. But the best part? They still had no idea. Not this time. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd find peace in a place I used to dread coming back to, I'd have laughed. Bitterly, probably. The mountains were never mine, not really. They were where my family went to make memories without me. Summer hikes, fall bonfires, winter cabins like this one. Places I'd only hear about afterward. Through photos I wasn't tagged in. Through stories told across the dinner table like I wasn't sitting there. But this time, I arrived early. This time, I unlocked the door. The cabin was quiet when we got there on the morning of the 30th. Snow blanketed the driveway, untouched except for the tire tracks we left behind. The air was sharp and still, and as we stepped out of the truck, I felt something shift. Not just the cold settling into my jacket. Something deeper. A quiet kind of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I carried my son in one arm and a tote of board games in the other. Kayla held our daughter's hand, who squealed when she saw the icicles hanging from the eaves. Inside, the cabin was warm. Roger had already come through and lit the fireplace, laid out fresh linens, even left a little basket of hot cocoa packets on the counter with a handwritten note. "You deserve it, my friend. Enjoy." The first thing I did was post the sign. Closed for private use. Owners, guests only. Nailed right into the wooden gate. Bold red lettering on a clean white background. Not threatening. Not aggressive. Just clear. Unmistakable. Then I set out mugs and poured cocoa. I didn't tell the kids who we were expecting. I didn't tell Kayla either, not exactly. I think deep down, she knew. She saw it in the way I kept checking the driveway. The way I kept the porch lights on even during the day. The way I stood by the front window every hour, waiting. And she didn't press. She just wrapped herself in a blanket and watched our daughter build a snow fort while our son clumsily tried to roll a snowman's head. That first night was one of the best we'd had in months. We played games, ate homemade chili, watched a movie by the fire. The kids fell asleep on the couch under a tangle of throw blankets, and Kayla and I stayed up long after midnight, just sitting in silence. Her hand in mine, our mugs empty, something old and heavy slipping off our shoulders one breath at a time. I didn't know what would happen when they arrived. I didn't plan past that moment. I only knew they were coming, that they still had no idea the booking was canceled, that someone was going to be driving up that long snowy road expecting to walk into a familiar space and finding me instead. But the thing is, the moment didn't come the next day, or the next. The whole 31st passed in silence. We went sledding in the back hills, roasted marshmallows, taught our daughter how to use the fireplace poker without panicking. We danced to old music in wool socks. We let go of everything that wasn't this. And somewhere between the laughter and the quiet, the cold and the warmth, I started to realize something I hadn't in years. I was okay. Not just functioning, or stable, or providing. I was okay. Like something broken had finally stopped trying to hold itself together with tape and shame. Like I'd finally exhaled after years of holding my breath. It was strange. I thought standing on that porch, seeing their faces as they realized what had happened, that would be the moment I'd feel strong again. That would be the revenge. But no, that wasn't it. This was. The revenge wasn't the denial. It wasn't the sign. It was the peace. The unshakable truth that I didn't need them anymore. And that, ironically, infuriatingly, was exactly when they showed up. January 1st, 10:17 a.m. I was making pancakes when I heard tires crunching snow up the driveway. My daughter peeked out the window and gasped. "It's Nana's car." Kayla looked at me. "Is this?" I nodded. She didn't ask anything else. Just gently guided the kids upstairs. I heard the click of our bedroom door. Then silence. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee and watched the SUV crawl to a stop just outside the gate. The private use sign stood tall in the center, the red letters sharp against the snow. Dean was the first one out. He frowned at the sign, then looked up at me. I raised my mug in greeting. "Morning." He blinked, confused. Then the driver's side opened and my mom stepped out. She was wrapped in a heavy parka, designer sunglasses covering her eyes, but I saw her lips part slightly when she recognized me. "Elvis," she said, walking up to the gate. What are you doing here?" I didn't move. "Enjoying the weekend." "But this cabin is." She looked back at Dean, who was already scrolling through something on his phone. "We booked this. Through the app. We confirmed. Why is it marked private?" I took another sip of coffee. "Because it is private. Owner's use only." She laughed nervously. "Well, can you call the owner? There's been some mistake." "No mistake," I said quietly. "I'm the owner." Silence. Dean looked up from his phone, eyes narrowing. "What?" "I own this property," I said, stepping down one stair toward the gate. "Bought it back in June. Renovated it. Listed it under my company. You rented it through a third-party site. not realizing who it belonged to. My mom blinked. Dean scoffed. No, that's not possible. I tilted my head. Why not? Well, you never said anything, my mom stammered. You never mentioned you bought a cabin. You never asked, I said simply. Dean stepped closer, his voice tightening. So what? You're just what? Flexing on us now? Blocking us from using it because you're mad you didn't get invited? I smiled. Not wide. Not smug. Just enough to make it clear I wasn't rattled. You're free to use it. Just not this weekend. My mom's voice rose. Elvis, be reasonable. We drove all the way out here. The kids are in the car. There's nowhere else. Not my problem, I said, still calm. You wanted peace. So did I. Now we both have it. And that was when it shifted. Her face fell. Dean's clenched jaw relaxed into something colder. And just like that, the indignation began. They tried guilt first. Tried to tell me how unfair I was being. How embarrassing this was for the rest of the family. How small I was acting. When that didn't work, they tried logic. It's just a cabin, Dean said. Just a weekend. You're really going to throw your own family out over hurt feelings. I didn't respond. Just sipped my coffee. When logic didn't work, they tried anger. And well, that's where things got interesting. Because in that moment, with my mother's voice sharp and shrill, Dean's face flushed with frustration, Clara stepping out of the car looking thoroughly unamused, I didn't feel hurt. I felt free. But that freedom, that peace, it didn't last long. Because what I hadn't anticipated, what none of us had, was what happened after they left. And that was when everything really started to fall apart. Not just for them, but for me. They left the cabin in silence. No screaming, no tantrums, no smashed windows or kicked snow piles. Just quiet, bitter defeat. Dean clenched his jaw the entire time, refusing to meet my eyes. My mom avoided looking at me altogether. She stared at the ground like she was trying to rewrite the snow with her eyes. Clara muttered something under her breath as she climbed into the SUV, but I didn't catch it. Probably for the best. They reversed down the driveway, the tires crunching softly through the snow. The private use sign swayed slightly in the wind behind them. I stood on the porch and didn't move until their car vanished behind the treeline. The coffee in my hand had gone cold. I wish I could say I went back inside and celebrated. That I high-fived Kayla, laughed with the kids, toasted to poetic justice and righteous revenge. But I didn't. Not at first. I just stood there, numb, watching the sun flicker through the trees. Because the truth was, it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a line had been drawn, and I wasn't sure yet what side I was standing on. The silence inside the cabin was thick. Kayla was sitting on the edge of the couch, arms crossed tightly, her expression unreadable. She looked at me like she wasn't sure whether to be proud or worried. Our daughter peeked down the stairs and asked, "Why did Nana look so mad?" I didn't have an answer. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling beams, replaying the whole confrontation over and over. I didn't regret what I'd done. That part was clear. What I struggled with was what came next. Because a man doesn't just get up from years of quiet humiliation, find his spine, and then go back to pretending it never happened. Once you cross the line, you stay on the other side. And the longer I stared at the ceiling, the more I realized I wasn't just done being left out. I was done. Done playing the peacekeeper. Done tiptoeing around fragile egos. Done shrinking myself so they could stretch their comfort. They drew the blueprint when they excluded my kids. They built the house when they called my wife not a good fit. I just turned the key. And now? Now it was time to remodel. I got my first clue that they hadn't learned anything the next morning. January 2nd. I was sipping my coffee in the kitchen when my phone lit up. It was a message from Dean. That was a low blow, man. You made your point. Don't drag this out. No apology. No reflection. No, hey, maybe we should talk. Just a passive-aggressive jab wrapped in faux diplomacy. I didn't respond. He texted again a few hours later. Clara's pretty upset. You embarrassed her in front of the kids. I set my phone down and walked outside. And that's when I made the decision. No more passivity. No more waiting to be included. If they were going to draw battle lines, I was going to build walls. Brick by brick. But not out of spite. Out of clarity. And, if I'm being honest, maybe just a little bit out of strategy. See, for years, I kept my professional life completely separate from my personal one. My family never knew how many properties I actually owned, how many rental contracts I managed, how many income streams I had quietly built over the years while they brushed off my job as something with real estate. But now that they'd booked my cabin without knowing who owned it, now I saw the advantage in staying invisible, because invisibility can be powerful, especially when people think you're harmless. The day we got home from the cabin, I sat down with a legal pad and started writing. Not a revenge plan, not exactly. More like a shift in strategy. Over the years, my family had leaned on me for little things. Quiet things. They never acknowledged them directly, but I'd helped them more than they realized. Offered advice when Dean wanted to refinance his house. Connected my dad with a good tax accountant when he panicked over his retirement plan. Helped my mom list her old sewing machine collection on an estate auction site that I personally called to negotiate better terms for her. They never said thank you, and I never asked them to, but I kept track. And now I started making calls. First, I called my friend Brielle, who runs a boutique event planning company. She used to be one of my tenants, back when she was just getting started. I'd given her a break on rent during a rough quarter and helped her network with some investors. She owed me a favor. Hey, I said, quick question. You remember that Gala Clara's nonprofit is hosting next month? Sure. Their marketing is all over social media. What? Can you send me a list of their major sponsors? She hesitated. Elvis, you thinking about stirring something up? Not unless they push me, I said calmly. Just gathering context. She sent the list. Then I called a client who runs a catering company that Clara's nonprofit uses regularly. I didn't ask him to cancel on her event. That would have been petty. I just offered to cover the cost of their March bookings, provided they took a different client list that week. Easy. Next, I reached out to the property manager I hired for the lakefront units. Two of them, I'd recently discovered, were currently being rented by mutual acquaintances of Dean's, old friends from college who play poker with him every third Friday. Let them finish their current leases, I said. But when they're up, bump rent by 10%. Offer them a list of comparable units nearby if they ask why. All fair market stuff. No reason to extend discounts. I wasn't sabotaging them. I was just clarifying boundaries. Invisibility had protected me for years. Now I was learning how to use it. The most difficult step, though, came when I visited my parents. Kayla didn't want me to go. They've shown you who they are, she said. What's the point? The point, I said quietly, is to make sure they know I know. I showed up with a bottle of wine and a calm expression. My mom opened the door, surprised. Elvis. I nodded. Just wanted to talk. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Your father's in the back. Want some tea? No, thanks. The house hadn't changed in decades. Same embroidered pillows. Same faint smell of lemon cleaner and old paper. I sat on the edge of the couch while she poured herself a cup and sat across from me. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. At the cabin. It felt cruel. I nodded. I'm sorry you felt that way. She frowned. That's not an apology. It's not meant to be. She blinked. I took a breath. I need you to hear something. And I need you to understand I'm not asking for an argument. Or for validation. Just clarity. She nodded stiffly. For years, I've watched you build a version of this family where my role was to stay quiet and helpful. To never take up too much space. To let Dean shine. To let his kids shine. To make myself useful and invisible and out of the way. Elvis, that's not fair. It's true. I said, sharper than I intended. I steadied myself. You've said it yourselves. I'm too sensitive. I overreact. I hold grudges. So you plan events without me. You don't ask my kids what they want. You don't treat Kayla like a real member of this family. My mom stared into her teacup. And I've taken it. I've smiled through it. Until now. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You don't get to exclude me and then ask me to carry your luggage. You don't get to book my cabin and call me petty when I use it. You don't get to insult my wife and still expect me to mow your lawn in the spring. I stood up. And just so we're clear, there will be boundaries moving forward. Respect them, and I'll return it. Ignore them, and I'll disappear completely. I don't need this. I don't need any of it. You've seen what I can build. Quietly. On my own. Imagine what I can do when I'm no longer holding back. She didn't speak. I walked out without looking back. In the following weeks, things changed. Kayla started smiling more. Laughing more. She took the kids to her sister's place for a sleepover without needing to check if we were invited somewhere else. I started investing in new properties. Opened 2 new short-term rentals in a ski town a few hours away. brought Roger on as a partner instead of just a caretaker. We rebranded the company under a new name, one that didn't trace back to my personal identity. I was building a legacy now, not just surviving. And all the while, I kept getting little signs that my family still didn't get it. Dean posted a passive-aggressive quote on Facebook. Some people burn bridges, then wonder why no one visits. Clara shared a photo of her nonprofit gala, noticeably scaled down. My mom sent a birthday card to my son that said, "We miss you. Hope Daddy lets us see you soon." Let's just say, I kept every receipt, because I wasn't done yet. They still thought this was about hurt feelings. They had no idea I'd just started laying the foundation. I never expected the final blow to come in the form of a real estate seminar. A local development firm was hosting it. Nothing flashy, just a 3-day event at a mid-range hotel conference room with coffee urns in the back and overly confident speakers with wireless mics. I went because one of the speakers, a former colleague of mine, was talking about diversification through silent equity partnerships. I hadn't planned on staying long. Honestly, I didn't even plan to be noticed. But when I walked into the room and saw my brother Dean sitting in the second row, bright-eyed, notepad open, whispering something to the man next to him, I froze. He hadn't seen me. Yet, I could have walked right out. No confrontation, no awkwardness, no drama. But I stayed. I grabbed a seat near the back, kept my hat on, and listened. It didn't take long to figure out why he was there. The speaker was walking through a common real estate play, joint ventures through equity pooling. The idea? Investors without capital could still get a piece of property deals by partnering with someone who had the cash flow. It was smart if you trusted your partners, if you had a reputation, if you had leverage. Dean, I later found out, had none of those. After losing his job the year before, he'd bounced around doing freelance IT work, but it hadn't been steady. Clara's nonprofit didn't bring in real income, just enough to look good on social media, and their savings were thinning. So Dean decided to try real estate. He'd already failed to secure 2 loans due to bad credit and inconsistent income. This seminar? This was his last attempt to find a way in. That's when I saw the opportunity. Not to destroy him, but to expose him. The revenge wasn't about humiliation. It was about truth. About pulling back the curtain and letting everyone see what had been hiding behind the Golden Boy act all these years. After the seminar, I lingered outside while people shuffled out. Dean stepped into the hallway talking animatedly with a middle-aged man in a gray blazer. I recognized him, Brian Hartford, local investor. Had his hands in multiple development firms. We'd met once through a mutual client. "I've got 2 properties in mind already," Dean was saying. "Just need someone willing to back the equity. I bring the tech. You bring the capital." Brian looked interested. "You've done deals before?" Dean nodded without hesitation. "Couple rentals upstate. Helped my brother manage some properties too. Learned the ropes firsthand." I stepped forward. "Didn't realize I had a partner," I said, voice calm. Dean spun around. His face went pale. "What are you doing here?" Brian raised an eyebrow. "You 2 know each other?" I nodded. "He's my brother." There was a beat of silence. Dean tried to recover. "Yeah, he runs some listings. We've worked together." "No," I interrupted gently. "You've never worked with me. In fact, last time you tried to work with me, you booked one of my cabins without realizing I owned it, and then got mad when I used it myself." Brian blinked. "Wait, you're the owner of Mountain Pine Properties," I said, "and Birchen Hollow. And I recently acquired the leaseholds on 3 of your multifamily units in the Lake District. I believe we were going to connect next month." Brian's face lit up with recognition. "Elvis. Right. Yes. Your name came up last week." Dean looked like he'd swallowed a brick. I didn't linger. Just clapped my brother on the shoulder and said, "Next time you name drop me, at least make sure you've earned it." Then I walked away. That was the public fallout. The private one was worse. Because that same week, the fallout began to ripple through the family in ways they hadn't prepared for. Dean lost the equity deal. Brian called him dishonest and unstable in a quiet industry email chain that spread faster than wildfire. Other local investors, all interconnected, began pulling back. By February, Dean had no prospects, no partners, and no capital. His dreams of becoming a property developer? Over. Clara's gala? It flopped. The scaled-down version barely broke even. A few vendors didn't show up. Sponsors dropped out. One of the donors she'd insulted at a previous fundraiser turned out to be a friend of Brielle's, and she made sure word got around. Clara later posted a vague Instagram story about toxic sabotage and jealous people hiding behind fake kindness. Sure, Clara, my mother? She tried to play peacemaker. She called a week later, acting like nothing had happened. Invited us to dinner. Said the kids missed their cousins. That family shouldn't fight. I said we were busy. She tried again a few days later. I know you're hurt, she said. But you've made your point. No, I said. I've made my boundary. She didn't like that. Neither did my dad, who sent me a long-winded text about duty and letting things go and how the silent son always carried the burden. For once, I didn't respond. Because for the first time, I wasn't carrying anything. No guilt. No regret. No shame. I was light. Free. Kayla noticed it too. You're quieter these days, she said one night as we stood on the back deck, watching the kids play with sparklers in the yard. Quieter. She smiled. Not holding your breath all the time. She was right. Something had shifted in me. Something deep and permanent. Revenge wasn't supposed to fix things. I knew that. It didn't erase the years of being sidelined, overlooked, underestimated. But it did something else. It recalibrated the balance. It restored the dignity they'd chipped away at one subtle jab at a time. And it gave me back the one thing they'd never wanted me to have. Control. A few months later, I hosted a spring weekend getaway at the cabin. Not for my parents. Not for Dean. Just for friends. People who had shown up when it mattered. Kayla's sister and her kids. Brielle and her fiancé. Roger and his daughter. We barbecued on the deck, watched movies under the stars, and played music too loud. No one complained. And as I stood on the porch that night, beer in hand, porch light glowing behind me, I looked out across the snowless clearing where my family had once tried to make me feel small. And I smiled. Because I'd finally learned something I wish I'd known years ago. You don't owe loyalty to people who bank on your silence. And sometimes, the best revenge is ownership.